So good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the MIT Mobility Initiative Vision Day. I'm John Movinzadeh. I'm Executive Director of the MIT Mobility Initiative, and I'm also going to be our host to try to guide us through what will be a very, very packed day today. You'll notice that at the tables that you're sitting at, there's one sign that says Table Discussion Leader. So we ask if you try to align names on the program with the sign that says Table Discussion Leader. It's okay, we'll get ourselves sorted out. Look, first I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all of you who got on planes, everyone who traveled here, all the folks that are going to come through this room today, as well as to the folks that are joining us virtually. When Jinhua, Annie, and I started thinking about this event about 5 weeks ago, we said, okay, let's put together a program that has about maybe 40 or 50 participants. And I think what you'll see is we've certainly outdone that. So I want to give a sense of who's coming through the day today. So we have about 90 folks that are actually coming through this room throughout the course of the day. And almost an additional 40 that are joining us live. Who are they? About 14% from MIT, about 14% from government, from nonprofit sector, and then the majority, about 72%, from business. So with these panelists, the participants, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a good 40 or so people that have a chief something on their title, chief executive, chief technology officer, founder. So it really is a high-level crowd. And with this crowd, we could easily spend 2, 3, 4 days going through this agenda. We're covering autonomous vehicles, we're covering connectivity, we're covering electrification, we're covering trust data, we're covering mobility equity. We're not going to spend 2 or 3 days. We don't have that. We're going to go very, very fast. So we're not going deep, we're going broad. There's an expression at MIT that getting an education here is like drinking from a fire hose. So I hope that today you all experience a little bit of that fire hose effect. So now you might say, well, why aren't we going deep? And I think the best way to answer that question is to explain, why are we here today? What are we trying to accomplish? And there's really 3 things that we want to accomplish. The first is we want to introduce the MIT Mobility Initiative. And Jinhua will talk more about that. But for now, let me just say that when Jinhua founded this program last year, the purpose was to create an institute-wide platform to advance mobility as a system. And I want to focus on one key word there, system. So what do we mean? Now look, this institution has people that can speak much more authoritatively on systems than I can. In fact, you can say system dynamics was invented here by Jay Forrester in the 1950s. But let me take a stab at what we mean by system in this context. We mean multiple stakeholders, and often with very different incentives. So energy companies, insurance companies, these different industries, different alignments, different cultures, different incentives. Second, we mean interdependence among those stakeholders. And when you add these 2 formulas of multiple stakeholders and this interdependence, you end up with the 3rd characteristic of the system, which is complexity. And that leads to things like the law of unintended consequences. And we know this in mobility. The highway is clogged. The transportation engineers step in and say, let's add a lane. And they add a lane, and the highway unclogs. And then magically, a year or 2 later, we're right back to where we started. The law of unintended consequences is high in systems. And mobility, the movement of people and goods, is a system. So to start to shape that system, we need to understand the big picture, and hence this very sort of broad program that we're covering today. But let's be clear about one thing. At the MIT Mobility Initiative, we do have clear objectives for what we want to accomplish with this system. And it really comes down to 3 words: safe, clean, and inclusive. Now, some of you in the crowd might say, that's interesting. Why not efficiency? And I'd love to have that conversation with you in one of the breaks. But those 3 words, safe, clean, inclusive, that's a bit of our North Star. I was talking to somebody last night and he said, well, that's 3 stars. Okay, so that's our North constellation. That's where we're trying to go with this. So that's our first objective, to introduce the MIT Mobility Initiative. The second is to shape the research agenda. So we are actually today more interested in identifying good questions than necessarily answering good questions. And that may be somewhat frustrating for you, from those of you from the business world, but we feel that there are important gaps in knowledge in this very complex mobility system where MIT can make a difference, where we can contribute. Which brings me to our third objective for today, which is to build this community around mobility. The future of mobility is not being shaped at research universities. The future of mobility is being shaped in a dynamic, messy, complex ecosystem that involves 100-year-old corporations, that involves big tech like Amazon and Uber, that involves scrappy startups. And we feel that for this program to succeed, we need to connect deeply into that ecosystem. And that's why I'm very appreciative of all of you being here today. So it's really about you. We will offer a neutral platform, but we need the engagement of those of you on the front lines of mobility to make this a success. Before I turn it over to Jinhua, I just want to read a statement from the MIT mission statement. The Institute is committed to generating, disseminating, and preserving knowledge, and to working with others to bring this knowledge to bear on the world's great challenges. So that is why we are here. It's not just to create this knowledge, but it's to connect it and to bring it to bear and to actually make a real impact and a contribution. So I want to thank you for being part of the process of building the MIT Mobility Initiative with your input. I think with that input, the result will be far more valuable for all of you and help us to have an impact and to strive toward that goal of safe, clean, and inclusive mobility. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Jinhua Zhao, who, as I mentioned, is the real founder of this MIT Mobility Initiative. Thanks.
So how does MIT respond to the system challenge of mobility, as John just asked the question? It did not. We have many brilliant professors doing fantastic research work individually. There were no coherency. Universities organize knowledge by methodology: mechanical engineering, computer science, economics, urban planning. But with the mobility initiative, MIT chose to organize the scholarship by the real-world problem, by social relevance. On mobility, we made one observation. The transportation industry is booming, but in flux. Communities and cities are confused and anxious about their future. And ecosystem pressure is daunting. At MIT, 50 professors from 12 different department centers come together to offer a cross-disciplinary response. When we have 50 professors talking to each other, we can produce marvel or we can produce chaos. Right? Every single one of them have their own framework of thinking. Right? Can we impose an intellectual structure upon this vast scholarship? It's a close to impossible task, but we did that. Right? We categorize them into 3 pillars: technology, data, and value. Technology and data capture spotlight. You will see many today. And MIT contribute to both. Now, I just drive your attention to the changes of value. What do transportation professionals do? The answer was simple previously, solving congestion problem. But today, transportation is a climate change problem. It's an urban livability problem. It's a social justice problem. And it's a public health problem. Mobility have a much richer set of goals to pursue. The Mobility Vision Day reflects the structure of technology, data, and value. The MIT Mobility Initiative tried to offer a safe place to converse, as John mentioned, but also a safe place to fail. Different organizations in society have different degrees of tolerance of risk. Public sector, the lowest, for good reason. Their priority is stability. Private sector, higher, but still have the bottom line to guard. But universities should have the highest degree of risk tolerance. In many ways, professors are paid to fail so that others do not need to. At MIT, we envision mobility scenarios that do not exist today, but could exist tomorrow. The future of mobility will be turbulent, but exciting. We gather here today to be part of that definition. Thank you, everybody.